My daughter-in-law, Chloe, left an empty seat at my son's funeral. It was a cold, hard fact, as tangible as the polished oak of his casket and the cloying scent of funereal lilies that threatened to suffocate me where I stood. I clutched the podium, my knuckles white, a sea of somber black and gray blurring before my eyes. My gaze kept returning to that one vacant chair in the front row, a wound in the fabric of our family, a silent scream of disrespect that echoed louder than any hymn the organist played. 37 people came to say goodbye to my son, Marcus. I had counted them as they filed in, their faces etched with practiced sympathy. 37 souls who cared enough to carve out a piece of their dreary Tuesday to honor his memory. His wife of 6 years was not one of them. I delivered the eulogy myself, my voice a fragile thing I barely recognized, a stranger in my own throat. I spoke of Marcus's laugh, that deep, rolling thunder that could fill a room and make the floorboards vibrate. I told the story of how, as a boy, he'd found an injured robin and nursed it back to health in a shoebox, his small face a mask of fierce concentration. I spoke of his kindness, how he'd once spent an entire weekend building a wheelchair ramp for our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gable, without ever being asked, his hands clumsy, but his heart determined. I did not speak of the shadows that had gathered in his eyes these past few years. I didn't mention the strained, whispered arguments that bled through the walls when he and Chloe thought I was asleep in the guest room, their words sharp and indistinct like shattered glass. I pretended not to notice how he'd grown distant, how his brilliant tech startup, a source of such immense pride, seemed to be consuming him from the inside out. As people filed past the casket, their murmurs were like sandpaper on my raw nerves. "Where's Chloe? Isn't that just awful, her missing this? Poor Eleanor, all alone up there." Their pity was a heavy cloak I didn't want, woven from threads of misunderstanding. They saw a grieving mother, abandoned in her darkest hour. I saw a fool who had seen the cracks in her son's marriage and papered them over with hope and denial. Back in the unnerving silence of my home, the quiet was a physical weight. The sympathy casseroles sat untouched on the counter, their foil covers gleaming under the kitchen lights. Grief is supposed to be a shared burden, a vigil kept by many. But mine felt solitary, a jagged stone in my chest I had to carry alone. The air was thick with memories, with the ghosts of laughter and conversations that would never happen again. Before I show you what I found in the suffocating quiet of that night, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story already has you hooked, please like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing these truths. I'd called Chloe 6 times after the hospital pronounced him gone. A sudden massive heart attack at 34, they'd said. Stress-related? A diagnosis that felt both too simple and too complex. On the phone, Chloe had sounded convincingly shattered, her voice cracking with sobs as she promised to catch the first flight back from her work trip in Chicago. She'd asked about arrangements through her tears. Her performance flawless. That was 4 days ago, 4 days of silence. Tonight, grief and a bitter, unnamed suspicion led me to do something I never do. I opened my laptop, the glow of the screen a harsh intrusion in the dimly lit room. I typed her name into the search bar of Instagram. Her profile, set to public, was a curated gallery of a perfect life. The profile picture was still the two of them on a boat in Lake Michigan, smiling into the sun, his arm slung protectively around her shoulders. A perfect couple. A perfect lie. I scrolled down, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm of dread. And then I found it. The most recent post, uploaded just 3 hours ago. While I was standing over my son's grave, my hand trembling as I tossed a single white rose onto his casket, she had posted a picture. It was Chloe, in a glittering, backless cocktail dress, a champagne flute raised high in a toast. She was on a balcony overlooking a city of lights I recognized instantly. Paris. The Eiffel Tower, lit up like a diamond constellation, glittered behind her. Beside her, a handsome, dark-haired man I'd never seen before had his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. His hand splayed possessively on her hip. His name was tagged in the photo, Julian. The location tag confirmed it. Le ciel de Paris? She was laughing, her head thrown back in a posture of pure, unadulterated ecstasy. But it was the caption that felt like a deliberate twist of the knife, a message aimed directly at me. 5 chilling words that turned my blood to ice. Some things are better left buried. I stared at it, reading it over and over, each word a separate blow. A taunt, a celebration. While I buried my son, she was toasting to it from the rooftops of Paris. The comments beneath were a chorus of congratulations and sickening encouragement. Her sister wrote, "So glad you're finally free. He's perfect for you." Free? Was my son's death her ticket to freedom? I slammed the laptop shut, the plastic clap echoing like a gunshot in the silent house. My hands were shaking with a rage so profound, so pure, it stole my breath. This wasn't grief. This wasn't callousness. This was a declaration of war. My phone buzzed on the kitchen table, a sharp, intrusive sound in the suffocating quiet. I glanced at the screen, expecting another sympathy text from a well-meaning neighbor. But the name that glowed there was impossible. It defied the laws of nature, of life and death. It was a message from an unknown number. But the preview text on the lock screen showed just one word. Mom. I snatched it up, my heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic, panicked bird. I unlocked the phone, my thumbprint slick with sweat. The full message was short, urgent, and shattered all logic. Mom, don't trust her. Check my room, now! The sender's name at the bottom of the text, Marcus. I dropped the phone. It clattered to the linoleum floor, the screen spiderwebbing into 1,000 tiny fractures. But I didn't care. I just stood there, frozen, staring at the shattered pieces of my reality. My son was dead. I had seen his body. I had planned his funeral. But he had just sent me a message. And that message was a warning. What kind of hell had I just stepped into? The message was a ghost. A digital specter flickering on the cracked screen of my phone, mocking the finality of the grave I had just stood beside. Mom, don't trust her. Check my room, now! For a long, silent moment, I couldn't breathe. My mind, already fractured by grief, scrabbled for a rational explanation. It had to be a prank. A cruel, sadistic joke orchestrated by someone who knew our family, someone who got their hands on a list of funeral attendees. But who would do something so vile? The thought was a venomous whisper in the back of my head. Chloe. Was this part of her sick celebration? Another twist of the knife to push me further into the abyss of grief, to make me seem like a hysterical old woman if I ever spoke of it? No, the tone was wrong. It was too direct, too urgent. It felt protective. It felt like Marcus. My Marcus. The sheer, bald-faced impossibility of it was a wall I couldn't seem to climb. Dead men don't send text messages. They don't warn you from beyond the veil. But the command was clear, a soldier's order from a son I never knew. Check my room. I stood motionless for another minute, the cracked phone on the floor, a testament to my shock. I almost called my sister, wanting to hear another voice, to have someone tell me I was exhausted and imagining things. But I stopped myself. What would I say? My dead son just texted me? She would think my grief had finally broken me. I was alone in this. A cold resolve began to settle over the chaos in my mind. If this was a prank, I would uncover the sick individual behind it. If it wasn't, I couldn't allow myself to finish that thought. I picked up the shattered phone, slipped it into my pocket, and grabbed my keys. My movements were stiff and robotic, my body operating on some primal autopilot. The 20-minute drive to the house he'd shared with Chloe was a blur of streetlights smearing across the rain-slicked asphalt. Every passing car felt like a threat. Every shadow seemed to hide a pair of watching eyes. The familiar tree-lined street of their upscale neighborhood now felt alien and menacing. Their house, a handsome colonial I had once adored, sat dark and imposing against the bruised purple of the night sky. A monument to a life cut short and secrets buried deep. I still had my spare key, a small piece of brass that now felt like a sacred, forbidden relic. My hand shook as I slid it into the lock, the cold metal a shock against my skin. The click of the deadbolt retracting echoed in the tomb-like stillness of the street. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Marcus?" I called out, my voice a fragile thread in the cavernous silence. The air was cold, stale, smelling faintly of Chloe's expensive, cloying perfume, and something else. Neglect. A thin layer of dust coated the surfaces. The living room was a museum of a dead marriage. Wedding photos on the mantel. Chloe beaming, Marcus smiling, but with something reserved in his eyes. His graduation portrait from Northwestern. His face so full of youth and uncomplicated optimism. A life captured in silver frames, now looking like relics from another civilization. I walked past it all, my focus singular, my mission clear. His room. He hadn't meant his old childhood room at my house, filled with baseball trophies and dusty books. He meant his room here, his sanctuary, his office. The door at the end of the hall was closed. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the cool brass knob. What would you do if you got a message from someone you just buried? Would you have the courage to open that door, not knowing what you might find? I had to. It was the last thing he had asked of me. I pushed it open. The room was neat, almost sterile, a stark contrast to the creative chaos of the rest of the house. A large modern desk faced the window. A sleek computer, its screen dark, sat like a black mirror. The bookshelves were lined with technical manuals and business biographies I'd never understand. It was the room of a man who valued order, a man who built systems. I didn't know what I was looking for. A letter? A hidden journal? I started with the desk drawers, pulling them open one by one with a sense of methodical desperation. Pens, paper clips, old invoices, branded stationery. Nothing. I moved to the bookshelves, running my hands along the spines of the books, feeling for a hidden switch or a hollowed-out compartment, like in an old detective movie. Nothing. Desperation began to curdle the adrenaline in my veins. Was I going insane? Was this a wild goose chase orchestrated by my own grief-addled imagination? I sank into his large leather office chair, the same chair where I'd watched him build his empire from a single line of code, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I felt utterly defeated. I put my head in my hands, the rich scent of leather and his faint, lingering cologne, a painful, gut-wrenching reminder of him. My foot tapped nervously on the floor, the sound hollow in the oppressive quiet. And then I heard it. A slight, uneven sound. Not a solid thud against the floorboards, but a dull, hollow echo. I froze, listening. I tapped my foot again, deliberately this time, moving it around the space under the desk. There! A spot just to the right of where my feet rested. It sounded different. Wrong. I dropped to my knees, my old joints protesting with a sharp crack. I pulled back the heavy corner of the ornate Persian rug. The dark wood of the floor was seamless, or so it seemed at first. But as I angled my head, the dim light from the hallway caught the faintest of outlines. A perfect square, almost invisible. A loose floorboard. My breath caught in my throat. I wedged my fingernails, brittle with age, into the thin crack. It wouldn't budge. I fumbled in my purse for my car keys and used the edge of one to pry at the seam. The board lifted with a soft, reluctant groan, revealing a dark, recessed space beneath. My hands trembled as I reached into the darkness. My fingers brushed against cold metal. I pulled it out. It was a small, sleek metal lockbox, heavy and cool in my hands. It wasn't locked. With my heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs, I fumbled with the latch. I lifted the lid. What I saw inside made no sense. It was a chaotic jumble of a life I didn't recognize. A thick stack of $100 bills, at least $20,000, bound by a simple rubber band. A small, anonymous burner phone, the kind you see in spy movies, sleek and untraceable. And underneath it all, a passport. I picked it up, my thumb tracing the stiff, official embossing of the United States of America. It felt foreign, dangerous. I opened it to the photo page. My heart stopped. The picture was of my son, Marcus. His face was a little thinner, his hair shorter, but it was him. His eyes stared out, serious and unsmiling. But the name printed in crisp, official font beneath the photograph was not his. It was Alex Miller. I stared at the face of my son, a man I had just buried, under the name of a stranger, holding a passport to a life I knew nothing about. Who was Alex Miller? And where, in God's name, was my son? The name Alex Miller echoed in the silent room, a question with no answer, a key to a door I never knew existed. The cold metal of the burner phone felt heavy in my palm, an artifact from a secret life my son had been living right under my nose, a life of burner phones and fake identities. I sank back into his office chair. The stack of cash and the false passport laid out on the gleaming surface of the desk like pieces of an impossible puzzle. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Marcus, my straightforward, honest-to-a-fault son, involved in something that required this level of subterfuge? The Marcus I knew was a man who paid his taxes early and felt guilty if he forgot a birthday. This version, this Alex Miller, was a phantom, a stranger who wore my son's face. With trembling fingers, I pressed the power button on the burner phone. The screen flickered to life, stark and impersonal. There was no lock screen, no photo of him and Chloe on a sunny beach, just a blank gray background. I navigated to the contacts with a clumsy thumb. There was only one entry, a single cryptic word. Helper. My heart pounded. Who was Helper? A friend? An enemy? A handler? The word itself felt both reassuring and sinister. I checked the call logs. Empty. The message inbox? None. My initial flicker of hope began to wither. Was this another dead end, another piece of the puzzle that refused to fit? Then my eyes caught it. A folder on the main screen, labeled simply, Audio Logs. My breath hitched in my throat. I tapped on it. A list of 10 files appeared, dated over the last 3 months. Log 1, Log 2, and so on, up to Log 10. With a sense of both dread and desperate need, I tapped the first one. A soft hiss of static, and then, his voice. It was Marcus, but it was a version of him I'd never heard before. Strained, exhausted, and laced with a paranoia that made my skin crawl. Log 1, he began, his voice low and rushed, as if he were afraid of being overheard, even in his own recording. If anyone is hearing this, if you're hearing this, Mom, it means I'm gone. Or I've had to run. I can't risk writing anything down. They watch everything, my emails, my phone, my digital life. It's all compromised. A cold dread washed over me, a physical sensation like ice water being poured down my spine. They? Who were they? It started 6 months ago, he continued, the words tumbling out. A new investor for my company, a private equity firm called Viridian Global. They seemed perfect on paper. Endless resources, powerful connections in every sector. They bought a 30% stake. Our valuation skyrocketed overnight. But it was a deal with the devil. I was so blinded by the money, by the chance to scale up, I didn't do my due diligence. I found out what they were really doing 2 months ago. They weren't investing in tech. They were using my logistics platform, my proprietary software, to move things. Illegal things. Not just laundering money, but moving illicit goods, untraceable shipments across borders. I saw the manifests, the real ones, hidden in a sublayer of the code I didn't know they had access to. I stumbled into something massive, a global criminal enterprise hiding in plain sight behind a legitimate corporate face. His voice cracked, and I could hear the self-loathing in it. I built a tool to make supply chains more efficient, and they turned it into a highway for criminals. I tried to back out. I went to the CEO, a man named Sterling. I told him I wanted to buy back their shares, that I was dissolving the partnership. He laughed at me. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Son, you're in for life now. You know too much." That's when the threats started. I listened, frozen, as the next log autoplayed. detailing the terror of his last few months. Log 2. There was an incident today. My brakes failed on the expressway. I managed to get the car onto the shoulder, but I nearly took out a family in a minivan. The mechanic said the brake line had been deliberately severed, scored almost all the way through. It was a message. Last week, there was a gas leak at the house. Chloe and I woke up choking. The fire department said the fitting on the main line looked like it had been deliberately loosened. They're closing in, Mom. I can feel it. The paranoia isn't in my head anymore. It's real. The third log detailed his desperate plan. Log 3. I have to create an escape route, an exit strategy. That's where Alex Miller comes from. A new identity, a clean slate, a ghost in the machine. I have a friend, my helper. He's a genius, the only one I trust with this. He set it all up, the passport, the accounts, everything. The plan is to fake my death. A massive heart attack. My helper has a contact at the hospital, a doctor who owes him a life-altering favor. He can falsify the records, sign the certificate, make it look completely official. Once I'm dead, the threat from Viridian should disappear. I'll be off their radar. Just another tragic story of a young entrepreneur who burned out. He paused, and I could hear him take a shaky, hopeful breath. And then he spoke the words that would haunt me. Log 4. Chloe. Chloe knows everything. I had to tell her. I sat her down and laid it all out. Viridian, the threats, the escape plan. She was terrified, but she was so strong. She held my hand and told me we were in this together, that we would disappear together, that we'd leave it all behind and start over, just the two of us. She's my rock, Mom. She promised she'd play the grieving widow for a few weeks, long enough for the dust to settle. Then she'd quietly liquidate what she could and meet me. We have a location, a protocol. We can finally be safe. We can start over. The audio file ended there. I sat in stunned, horrified silence, the puzzle pieces rearranging themselves into a picture of treachery so profound it was almost beautiful in its evil. He wasn't dead. He was in hiding. He'd faked his own death to escape murderers. And Chloe, his loving, devoted Chloe, was supposed to be his partner in this desperate escape. But she wasn't hiding. She was in Paris, toasting her freedom with another man, spending the money from the life insurance policy that was clearly meant to be their escape fund. The betrayal was so absolute, so complete. She hadn't just abandoned him. She had left him for dead, taking his meticulous escape plan and turning it into her personal jackpot. With a trembling finger, I scrolled to the next audio file, needing to hear more, to understand the full depth of her monstrous deception. But before I could press play, the burner phone vibrated violently in my hand, buzzing against the polished wood of the desk like a captured insect. The screen lit up. An incoming call. The name displayed was the one I both feared and desperately needed to hear from. Helper. I stared at it, my heart seizing in my chest. Should I answer? Was this the friend Marcus trusted with his life? Or was it a trap set by Viridian? My son's life, and now my own, could depend on this one simple decision. After a moment that stretched into an eternity, I took a deep, steadying breath and pressed the green icon. I raised the phone to my ear, my own breathing loud in the silence. Hello? I whispered. A click, a burst of static, and then a voice, electronically distorted, cold and robotic as a machine. Eleanor Morrison, he told you not to look. A chill traced its way down my spine, cold and sharp as a needle. The voice was devoid of all emotion, a terrifying monotone. Now you know, and that means you're in danger too. The distorted voice on the phone was a cold spike of fear in the silent house, an inhuman sound that seemed to suck all the warmth from the room. Who is this? I demanded, my own voice trembling despite my effort to sound strong and unafraid. Are you the helper? There was a pause, filled only by the low hum of electronic static. Marcus called me his helper, the synthesized voice replied. I called myself his contingency plan. He made me promise that if anything went wrong, if he couldn't contact you himself, I would. Chloe booking a one-way ticket to Paris with that man. That was not part of the plan. You finding that box was not part of the plan. My mind reeled, desperately searching for a foothold in this new, terrifying reality. I remembered Marcus mentioning a college friend from his computer science program, a quiet, lanky kid who saw the world in lines of code, a genius he'd always spoken of with a mix of awe and deep affection. Ben. Benjamin Carter. Ben, is that you? I asked. The name a hopeful plea, an anchor in the storm. Another pause. The robotic filter on the voice clicked off with a soft pop, replaced by the familiar, anxious tenor of a man in his mid-30s, a voice I hadn't heard in years, but recognized instantly. Eleanor, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to scare you with the voice modulator, but I couldn't risk the call being traced back to me. Viridian's reach is extensive. They have people everywhere. Relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. It was Ben, the one person Marcus trusted. The helper. Ben, what's happening? Is he okay? For God's sake, tell me, is Marcus alive? He's alive, Ben said, and I sagged in the chair, a sob of pure, unadulterated relief escaping my lips. It was the first time I had truly allowed myself to believe it. But he's in the dark, completely off-grid, as planned. He's at a secure location, no internet, no phone. He's waiting for her, Eleanor. He thinks she's at your house, grieving with you. The cruelty of it was a fresh wound, sharper than any before. My son, alone somewhere, holding on to the hope that the woman he loved was mourning him, when in reality she was dancing on his proverbial grave, spending the money meant for their survival. She's a monster, I whispered, the words thick with a venom I didn't know I possessed. She took everything. She left him with nothing. I know. Ben's voice was grim. When he went dark, I started monitoring Chloe's digital footprint as a precaution. The flight to Paris, the social media posts, the maxed-out credit cards. I knew the plan was compromised. She was never going to meet him. She was cashing out. That man she's with, Julian. I've run his name through every database I have access to. He has no real digital footprint, no social security history, no credit score. In my world, that's a massive red flag. He's a ghost. This is more than just a simple affair. I thought of the taunting caption. Some things are better left buried. It wasn't just a callous remark. It was a message. But to whom? To Marcus, if he was watching? Or to her new partner in crime? Do you think I was right to trust a stranger on the phone, even if he claimed to be a friend of my son? At that moment, I had no other choice. This voice was my only lifeline. What do we do? I asked, my voice gaining strength. The grief was still there, a dull, permanent ache, but now it was overlaid with a cold, hard layer of purpose. I was no longer just a grieving mother. I was a protector. First, you need to be safe, Ben said, his tone becoming urgent, commanding. They know Marcus had a mother. If Viridian gets even a whisper of a hint that he might be alive, you are their first and most vulnerable point of pressure. You can't go back to your house. You can't talk to anyone. For now, you stay there. Lock all the doors. Don't answer for anyone. I'm sending a private security detail to your location, but it will take them an hour to get there. And Marcus? I have to get a message to him, but it's risky. I have a dead drop protocol we established, but it's slow. It involves a third party who has no idea what they're carrying. He needs to know about Chloe before he breaks protocol and tries to contact her, exposing himself. I could hear him typing furiously in the background, the rapid-fire clicking of keys a comforting sound of action. There's more, Eleanor. Before he went under, Marcus was worried about something else, something he couldn't put his finger on. He said Chloe had become obsessed with his company's financials, asking questions that were too specific. Questions about offshore accounts and data encryption that were way beyond her usual interests. He suspected she was looking for something. What was she looking for? He didn't know. He thought she was just worried about their money, given the threats from Viridian. But now it feels different, darker. He mentioned he'd set up a private server, a digital vault where he kept his most sensitive corporate and personal files, completely firewalled from his main network. He called it his digital life raft. He said it was the one place Chloe would never think to look, because the access key wasn't a password or a code. My heart beat faster, a frantic drum against my ribs. What was it? A physical key, a biometric thumb drive he kept hidden. He told me that if anything ever happened to him, the full, unredacted truth about Viridian, the evidence to bring Sterling and his entire board down, was on that drive. Ben's typing stopped abruptly. The silence on the line was heavy with implication. He told me where he hid it. It's in his office, Eleanor. You're sitting in the room with the evidence that could either save Marcus or get you both killed. A new wave of fear, colder and sharper than before, washed over me. I was no spy. I was a retired librarian who liked gardening and baking for her non-existent grandchildren. But my son's life, his very existence, was on the line. Where is it, Ben? Tell me where to look. He was a sentimentalist, even with his secrets. Ben's voice was low, intense. He said he put it in the one place that symbolized his biggest failure and his greatest hope. He hid the key inside the frame of his first patent certificate, the one for the algorithm that started his whole company. It's hanging on the wall right behind his desk. I swiveled the leather chair around, my eyes landing on the wall. There it was. A simple, elegant black frame holding the official United States patent document. The piece of paper that had been the foundation of their wealth, their beautiful life, and now their utter destruction. The glass gleamed in the dim lamplight, hiding a secret that could change everything. The patent certificate hung on the wall, a silent testament to a brilliant dream that had curdled into a waking nightmare. My hands trembled as I lifted the heavy frame off its hook. It felt sacrilegious, like disturbing a tombstone. I laid it face down on the polished surface of the desk, the glass cool against the wood. With fumbling fingers, I unfastened the small metal tabs holding the backboard in place. The cardboard backing came away easily. The paper certificate itself, declaring Marcus Thorne as the inventor of a revolutionary logistics algorithm, was brittle with age. Behind it, taped securely to the center of the cardboard, was a small metallic object no bigger than my thumb. The biometric drive. It was cool and smooth to the touch. A sleek piece of modern technology that held the key to my son's secret, terrifying world. Ben, still on the line, had walked me through the next steps with the painstaking patience of a teacher guiding a nervous student. It's keyed to his fingerprint, Eleanor, but he created a secondary access protocol for you, a fail-safe in case he was incapacitated. You'll need his laptop. Plug the drive in. It will prompt for a single password. He told me the password is the name of the first dog you ever got him as a boy. A lump formed in my throat, thick and painful. Samson, I whispered, the name a ghost on my lips. A clumsy, lovable, perpetually shedding golden retriever who had been Marcus's shadow for 14 years. It was a detail so personal, so deeply rooted in our shared history, that it was a message in itself. A line of code only I could decipher. Mom, I trust you. It's always been you. I booted up the laptop, its screen casting a blue glow on my face. I plugged the drive into the USB port. A small window popped up instantly, a single field blinking, waiting. I typed the letters SAMSON. For a second, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered, and a new drive icon appeared on the desktop, labeled with two simple, chilling words. The truth. My heart hammered against my ribs, as if trying to escape. I clicked it open. The contents were terrifyingly, meticulously organized. It was my son's mind, laid bare in a series of folders. There were folders labeled Viridian, money laundering schematics, threat logs, and one that made my blood run cold, Chloe. I forced myself to be methodical. I opened the Viridian folder first. It was a labyrinth of encrypted spreadsheets, offshore account numbers, shipping manifests for ghost containers, and audio recordings of conversations with Sterling that Marcus had secretly captured. It was exactly as he had described, a massive criminal operation using his legitimate business as a shell. He had annotated everything, leaving a digital breadcrumb trail so clear that even a novice could follow it. It was enough evidence to put Sterling and his entire board of directors away for life. Then, my hand shaking, I moved my cursor and clicked on the folder labeled Chloe. It wasn't what I expected. I was steeling myself for love letters to another man, evidence of a simple, sordid affair. But it was much, much worse. The first file was a screen recording, captured by spyware Marcus must have installed on his own system. I watched in horror as the video showed Chloe, late at night in this very office, methodically searching his system, copying files related to the Viridian accounts onto an external drive. She wasn't just aware of the dirty money, she was actively trying to steal the data for herself. The next file was a series of audio recordings. Chloe on the phone with Julian, the man from the Paris photo. Their conversation wasn't about love or a future together. It was cold, transactional, and utterly chilling. "Did you get the account numbers?" Julian's voice was sharp, impatient, laced with a faint European accent. "Not all of them," Chloe replied, her tone sharp with frustration. "He's got the core data firewalled on a separate system. I can't get in. He's getting suspicious, Julian. He's talking about faking his own death to escape." There was a pause. Then Julian's voice, dropping to a menacing purr that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "Let him. It makes our job easier. We let him die. We get the life insurance payout as a bonus, and then you have all the time in the world to find the rest of the data. Sterling will pay a fortune, millions, to get that evidence back and bury it. We can bleed both sides, the dead husband and the dirty company." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place with a sickening thud. This wasn't an affair that led to a financial crime. This was a calculated, cold-blooded conspiracy from the start. Julian wasn't just a lover. He was her partner in a high-stakes heist. They weren't just after the insurance money. They were after the blackmail material on Viridian. Chloe was playing a double game, planning to betray both her husband and her new corporate paymasters. The insurance payout was just her seed money. Her Instagram post wasn't just a taunt to me. It was a signal to Julian that phase 1 of their plan was complete. Marcus was buried. She was free to execute phase 2. But that wasn't the worst of it. The discovery that she was a con artist was one thing, but it was the folder inside the Chloe folder that truly broke me. It was labeled simply, Health. I clicked it open. My blood ran cold. It contained downloaded medical articles about slow-acting, untraceable toxins that could induce cardiac arrest. It had screenshots of Chloe's credit card statements, showing purchases from obscure online chemical suppliers. And then, there was a final video file. It was from a tiny hidden camera, angled down from the top of the kitchen cabinets. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. I watched, my breath held tight in my chest, as Chloe moved about the kitchen, making coffee. She turned her back to the camera, then turned back, holding the coffee pot. With a furtive glance toward the hallway, she took a small, clear glass vial from her pocket. She unscrewed the cap and carefully, methodically, tipped 3 clear drops into the pot of coffee she had just brewed for my son. This was the twist that shattered everything. The reason my son looked so gaunt and anxious in his final months. He wasn't just stressed. He wasn't just paranoid. He was being systematically poisoned by his own wife. His stress-related heart attack wasn't a matter of if, but when. She had been actively trying to murder him. The faked death wasn't just an escape from Viridian. It was an escape from her. The sheer cold-blooded audacity of it left me breathless. She had watched my son suffer, listened to his fears, comforted him. All the while, she was the monster in his house, the author of his pain. She was a viper I had welcomed into my home, a predator I had called daughter. My grief, which had been a dull ache, now sharpened into a blade of pure, focused rage. She would not get away with this. I would burn her entire world to the ground. She thought she was untouchable, and most criminals do. If you want to see how they get caught, subscribe so you're not left in the dark. I was so absorbed in the files, in the horrifying web of her deceit, that I didn't hear it at first. A faint sound from downstairs. A key turning in the front door lock. My blood froze. Ben's security team wasn't due for another 40 minutes. Someone was in the house. I killed the laptop screen, plunging the room into darkness. My heart was a frantic bird beating against the cage of my ribs. I heard footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate, confident. They were coming closer. Closer! The footsteps stopped right outside the office door. I held my breath, praying they would move on, praying I was just hearing things. The doorknob began to turn. The click of the doorknob turning was the loudest sound I had ever heard. A small metallic snap that seemed to sever the last thread of my composure. The door swung open, silhouetting a figure against the dim light of the hallway. My heart leapt into my throat. It was Chloe. She stood there, her designer suitcase resting by her side, her face a mask of surprise that quickly curdled into sharp, angry suspicion. "Eleanor, what are you doing here? It's the middle of the night." She reached for the wall and flipped on the light switch. The sudden, sterile brightness of the overhead light made me flinch, my eyes watering. She looked exhausted, the manufactured glamour from her Paris photos stripped away, leaving behind a brittle, haggard woman. But her eyes were not tired. They were sharp, calculating, darting around the room, taking in every detail. She wasn't just surprised to see me. She was violated, her territory invaded. "I could ask you the same thing," I said, my voice dangerously calm, a low hum that betrayed none of the violent turmoil inside me. I stood up slowly from behind the desk, making sure my body blocked her view of the laptop and the biometric drive resting beside it. "I thought you were in Chicago. Or was it Paris? It's so hard to keep track." A flash of raw panic crossed her face, a brief, unguarded flicker, but she recovered instantly, forcing a weary sigh as if I were a tiresome nuisance. "It's been a whirlwind. I had to get away. The grief was just too much to bear, being in this house. I came back to pack some more of his things, to feel close to him." Her lies were so practiced, so smooth, they dripped from her lips like honey. A week ago, I would have believed her. I would have wrapped her in my arms, offered her a cup of tea, and told her we would get through this together. Now I saw the predator beneath the performance, the black, empty soul behind the beautiful mask. "You seem to be handling your grief remarkably well," I said, my tone laced with the ice of newfound knowledge. "Champagne on the Eiffel Tower looks very therapeutic. Tell me, is Julian a grief counselor?" Her composure finally cracked. "You were spying on me," she spat, her voice rising with indignation. "You posted it for the whole world to see," I retorted, my own voice rising to meet hers. "A celebration, wasn't it? Some things are better left buried." "A toast to your freedom. Is that what my son was to you? Something to be buried and forgotten so you could start your new life?" "You don't understand anything," she snapped, her voice becoming shrill. "Our marriage was a wreck. He was distant, paranoid, obsessed with his work. He was driving me insane. You think you knew him, but you have no idea what he was involved in." "Oh, I think I'm beginning to get a very clear picture," I said, taking a deliberate step forward from behind the desk. The fear I'd felt moments ago was gone, burned away by a cold, righteous fury. "Tell me about Viridian Global, Chloe. Tell me about the money laundering. Better yet, tell me about the chemicals you were buying online. The ones that cause cardiac arrhythmia. Were you just doing a little light reading, or were you hoping to speed up my son's stress-related health problems?" The color drained from her face completely. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish gasping for air. Her eyes darted from my face to the desk behind me, and she finally saw it. The laptop, its screen dark, and the small silver drive beside it. She knew. In that instant, she realized I had found everything. "How?" she stammered, taking a step back, her eyes wide with a terror that was, for the first time, genuine. "That's not possible." "He was a lot smarter than you ever gave him credit for," I said, my voice dropping to a low, menacing whisper that felt foreign on my own tongue. He trusted you, he loved you, and you were poisoning him. You were slowly, methodically murdering him while you pretended to be a loving wife. He was already a dead man, she shrieked, her facade of civility shattering into a million pieces. He was weak. He was going to get us both killed by Sterling. I did what I had to do to survive. That money, that evidence. It was my way out. You mean your jackpot, I corrected her, my voice hard as granite. Julian's jackpot. Did you really think he was in it for you? A professional con man like him? Or were you just the key he needed to open the vault? She stared at me, her chest rising and falling rapidly, her eyes filled with a desperate, cornered animal hatred. She saw the hard drive, the small silver key to her undoing, and her survival instincts took over. With a guttural scream, she lunged. Not at me, but at the desk. She scrambled for the drive, her fingers clawing at the smooth metal casing. I reacted without thinking, grabbing her arm, my grip surprisingly strong, fueled by a mother's rage. We struggled for a moment, a clumsy, pathetic dance of hatred and desperation in the cold, sterile office of the man she had tried to destroy. She was younger, stronger, but I was fueled by a righteousness she could never understand. And then, the front door downstairs burst open with a splintering crash that echoed through the entire house. Heavy, purposeful footsteps pounded into the house, up the stairs. Chloe froze, her eyes wide with a new kind of terror. "Is that him?" she whispered, looking wildly around. "Did Julian follow me?" But it wasn't Julian. Two men appeared in the doorway of the office. They were tall, broad-shouldered, and wore impeccably tailored dark suits that screamed efficiency and danger. They moved with an unnerving economy of motion, their expressions completely unreadable, their eyes scanning the scene with cold professionalism. They ignored Chloe entirely, dismissing her as irrelevant. Their focus was on me. The first man spoke, his voice calm and professional, a stark contrast to the chaos of the room. "Eleanor Morrison?" I nodded, my heart still hammering from the struggle, my hand still gripping Chloe's arm. "Your son sent us," he said, his eyes flicking briefly to Chloe, who now stood pale and trembling, finally understanding that she was no longer a player in this game, but a pawn about to be swept from the board. "We need to go, now." The two men in suits were a wall of calm authority in a room that had just been a vortex of chaos. They separated me from Chloe, with an almost gentle efficiency, one man positioning himself between us with a silent, immovable presence, while the other took my arm firmly, but not unkindly. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my mind struggling to process this new, bewildering turn of events. My adrenaline-fueled strength evaporated, leaving me shaky and old. "Private security," the man holding my arm said simply, his voice a low baritone. "Mr. Carter hired us on your son's behalf several weeks ago. Our instructions are to extract you to a secure location." Chloe stared at them, her face a canvas of disbelief and dawning horror. The fight had gone out of her completely, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. "Marcus hired you? That's impossible. He's dead. I have a death certificate." The man gave her a look of utter, soul-crushing indifference. "Ma'am, our client is very much alive. Please step aside." He guided me out of the office, his partner efficiently gathering the laptop, the biometric drive, and the burner phone from the desk, placing them into a specialized briefcase. We swept past Chloe as if she were a piece of furniture, a ghost in her own home. I glanced back one last time. She was standing frozen in the middle of the room, her plans, her entire world, collapsing around her in silent, catastrophic ruin. She was finally, truly, alone. The men led me to a black, unassuming SUV idling at the curb, its engine a low, powerful thrum in the night. The drive was silent, the city lights a meaningless blur outside the tinted windows. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. Marcus had hired security, weeks ago? He had the resources for this? The son I knew was a brilliant coder, who was often too lost in his work to remember to pay the electricity bill on time. The man who had orchestrated this was someone else entirely, a strategist, a ghost who could command men in suits from the shadows. We pulled into the attached garage of a nondescript suburban house in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood 20 miles away. The garage door rolled down behind us, sealing us in from the outside world with a quiet, final thud. The driver killed the engine. "He's waiting inside," he said. They led me through a door into a sparsely furnished kitchen. The air smelled of fresh coffee. And there, standing by the counter, a mug in his hand, was my son. He was alive. The sight of him, solid and breathing and real, hit me with the force of a physical blow. All the grief, the anger, the terror of the past week coalesced into a single, overwhelming wave of love and relief that buckled my knees. I rushed forward, and he met me halfway, dropping the mug on the counter and wrapping his arms around me. He felt too thin, his frame bony and fragile beneath his shirt. But he was warm. He was real. "Mom," he whispered into my hair, his voice thick with an emotion he could no longer suppress. "I'm so sorry. I am so sorry you had to go through this." We stood there for a long moment, just holding on, two survivors of a shipwreck clinging to a raft. When we finally pulled apart, I reached up and cupped his face in my hands, needing to feel the reality of him. I looked at him, really looked at him. The haunted fear was gone from his eyes, replaced by a hard, steely resolve I'd never seen before. This was not the anxious man who had recorded those desperate audio logs. This was Alex Miller. This was a man who had been to hell and walked back out. "How?" I asked, my voice hoarse, gesturing around the strange, anonymous house, at the silent security team standing by the door. "The money in the lockbox was just petty cash," he explained, leading me to the small kitchen table. "Before Viridian, when my company was still clean, I was successful. Very successful. I diversified my assets years ago, offshore accounts, blind trusts, investments Chloe knew nothing about. She saw the beautiful house and the fancy cars, but she never bothered to understand the foundation it was all built on. I always believed in having a go bag for the company, a contingency fund in case of a hostile takeover. Turns out, I needed one for my life." Ben had gotten the message to him. He knew everything. About Chloe, about Julian, about the Paris trip, about the deeper, darker plot to murder him and sell his secrets. The news that should have shattered him had instead forged him into something new, something unbreakable. "When Ben told me what she'd done," he said, his voice flat and cold as a coroner's slab, "something inside me broke. Or maybe it was fixed. The part of me that was scared, that just wanted to run and hide, it died in that moment. All that's left is the part that wants justice." He then confirmed my deepest fears. "I knew she was poisoning me, Mom. I started feeling off months ago. Tired all the time, heart palpitations, a strange metallic taste in my mouth. I thought it was the stress from Viridian. Then, one day, I saw her wipe the rim of my coffee cup a little too carefully after she handed it to me. It was a tiny thing, but it was wrong. I set up a camera. The next day, I watched the footage. I saw what she was doing. A shiver of horror went through me. Why didn't you just leave? Confront her? And say what? My wife is poisoning me? She would have called me paranoid, crazy, used my stress as proof. It would have been my word against hers. No, I realized I couldn't just escape Viridian. I had to escape her. My faked death became my only way out from both of them. The cold calculation in his voice was chilling, but I understood it. He was a man fighting a war on two fronts. "The FBI is already moving on Viridian," he continued, his focus shifting. "Ben anonymously dropped the first half of the data, everything on Sterling and his money laundering. The feds are coordinating raids as we speak. Sterling will be in custody by morning. His empire is finished." "And Chloe?" I asked, my voice hard. A slow, dangerous smile touched his lips, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That's phase 2. The evidence of her conspiracy with Julian, and the proof that she was attempting to murder me, is on the second half of that drive. We could give it to the police. She'd go to jail for fraud, attempted murder, but it feels too simple. Too clean. She tried to erase me, Mom. She humiliated you. She needs to understand the full scope of her failure. She needs to be publicly undone. His eyes, so much like his father's, were burning with a cold fire. But to do that, to make sure she has nowhere left to run, I need you to do something very difficult. Something that will feel like a betrayal in itself. I held my breath, waiting. I need you to call her, he said, his voice low and intense. She's desperate. She's terrified. She thinks you've ruined her, but she doesn't know the whole world is about to find out. I need you to pretend you want to make a deal. Tell her you have the drive, and you're willing to trade it for a share of the money she thinks she's still going to get from Sterling. Lure her to a public place, a place where she'll feel safe, exposed, and completely in our control. My stomach turned. The idea of speaking to her again, of playing her game, felt vile. But I looked at my son, at the man he had been forced to become, and I saw the unwavering determination in his eyes. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about control. It was about taking the narrative she had tried to write and burning it to ash before her very eyes. It was the final move in a game she didn't even know she was losing so spectacularly. The phone felt unnaturally heavy in my hand, a conduit to a venomous creature I never wanted to speak to again. Marcus stood across the room, his arms crossed, watching me with an intensity that bolstered my resolve. He had coached me, given me the lines, but my heart still hammered against my ribs. I dialed Chloe's number. She answered on the first ring, her voice a ragged, desperate mess that held no trace of its former confidence. Hello? Chloe, it's Eleanor. For a moment, there was only the sound of her jagged breathing. Then, a torrent of panicked accusations. What have you done? Who were those men? Where did they take you? You can't do this. They work for me, I lied, my voice as cold and steady as a frozen river. It was a lie, but it was also a truth. In that moment, they were my instruments of justice, and by extension, they worked for me. I have the drive, Chloe. The one with all your dirty little secrets, the Viridian files, the Julian conversations, the receipts from the chemical supply store. I let that last one hang in the air, a drop of poison in her ear. I could almost hear her mind shutting down. What do you want? She whispered. The fight gone from her voice, replaced by the terrified pleading of the truly and utterly damned. You wanted to bleed both sides, I said, echoing Julian's words back to her, twisting the knife. Now, so do I. You were planning to sell that evidence to Sterling. That plan is still on the table, only now I'm your partner. I want in. 50%. I can't. Sterling is, she stammered, her thoughts a tangled mess. You will find a way. I cut her off, my voice sharp and commanding. Meet me tomorrow, noon, at Le Chardon. We'll discuss the terms over lunch. I named the ridiculously expensive French restaurant where we had once celebrated her and Marcus's third anniversary, a place of happy memories, now repurposed as the stage for her final public downfall. She agreed immediately, desperately. A drowning woman will grab for a razor blade if it's the only thing that floats. Le Chardon was an ocean of quiet wealth, the air buzzing with the lunchtime chatter of the city's elite. I sat at a small, pristine table in the center of the room, a glass of iced water in front of me, its surface beaded with condensation. I felt a strange, detached calm, as if I were watching a play unfold from a great distance. I thought of the empty chair at the funeral, the hole she had left in our lives. Today, I was going to show her what true emptiness looked like. She arrived 10 minutes late, looking frantic and disheveled. She wore an expensive silk blouse, but it was wrinkled. Her hair was a mess, and dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes. She darted her gaze around the restaurant, searching for threats in every corner. When she saw me sitting alone, a flicker of pathetic relief crossed her face. She thought she was here to negotiate her survival. She sat down, her hands trembling in her lap. "Do you have it?" she asked, her voice a reedy whisper that was lost in the clinking of silverware around us. I didn't answer. I reached into my purse and pulled out a single sheet of paper, sliding it slowly across the white linen tablecloth. It wasn't the drive. It was a printed copy of a bank statement from one of her hidden offshore accounts, an account she thought no one knew about. It showed a wire transfer of $50,000 to a holding company in the Cayman Islands, Julian's company, dated the day of Marcus's death. Her face went ashen. She stared at the paper, her brain unable to process how I could have it. As her eyes, wide with horror, lifted to meet mine, a well-dressed man approached our table. He wasn't a waiter. He exuded an aura of quiet, bureaucratic authority. "Chloe Pierce?" he asked formally. She nodded numbly, unable to speak. He placed a thick, heavy envelope on the table in front of her. "You've been served." At that exact moment, a collective gasp rippled through the restaurant. Heads turned not toward us, but toward the large, elegant television screen mounted above the bar. A breaking news alert flashed across the screen in bold red letters. A news anchor's face appeared, her expression grave and serious. "We have breaking news in the Viridian Global scandal that has rocked the financial world this morning," she announced, her voice crisp and clear. "Sources have confirmed that tech CEO Marcus Thorne, previously reported deceased 2 weeks ago from a heart attack, is alive. It is believed Thorne faked his own death to escape a criminal conspiracy and has been working as a key witness for the FBI to dismantle a cartel money laundering ring operating through Viridian." The camera cut to footage of a grim-faced Sterling being led away in handcuffs. The anchor's voice continued. "In a shocking and tragic twist, authorities have also implicated Thorne's wife, Chloe Pierce, and an international accomplice in a parallel plot to extort both Viridian Global and the Thorne estate. Evidence reportedly includes proof of an attempted murder plot against her own husband." A photo of Chloe and Julian from her Instagram post flashed on the screen. Her smiling, celebratory face was now the face of a wanted criminal, broadcast to a room full of gawking strangers. Every phone in the restaurant began to buzz and chime with the news alert. Every eye in that opulent room turned to our table, to her. She was trapped in a panopticon of her own making, judged by a jury of her peers, surrounded by strangers who now knew her every sin. Her face crumpled, the mask of the cunning conspirator dissolving to reveal the pathetic, greedy, and ultimately stupid woman underneath. There was no escape, no money, no Julian. Only the crushing weight of public shame and the cold, hard reality of justice. I stood up, leaving her there with the legal papers, the incriminating bank statement, and the complete and utter ruin of her life. As I walked away, I didn't look back. I learned that grief can feel like an ending, but sometimes it is just clearing the path for the truth. And the truth, once it starts rolling, is more powerful and more relentless than any lie. Betrayal builds a prison of its own design, brick by painful brick, and in the end, the person who holds the key is always the one who was wronged. What do you think is a just punishment for a woman like Chloe? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe that the darkest secrets always find their way into the light, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a story where justice is finally and completely served.